So I'm not going to belabor the whole story here because you can really go and watch it yourself. But there's an interesting chap, there's an interesting character that I've seen appear in a couple of podcasts lately. His name is Scott Payne. He used to work as an FBI undercover agent, doing lots and lots, or infiltrating lots and lots of different sorts of criminals, like outlaw biker gangs, white supremacist gangs, and so on. Highly worth listening, and he's out there on various podcasts. Once again, I'm not going to belabor all of his stories by repeating them because he's much better at retelling those stories than me. But there's a couple of things I want to address that he said, specifically when it comes to working undercover. Because, when you're infiltrating somebody who's a criminal and you're pretending to be a criminal yourself, right? You know that at some point you're going to make these people end up, you're gonna make it so that these people end up in jail, and some of these people might end up being your friends. So really what you're doing is betraying them, and you need to justify a way to do so. So essentially, here's what he said, paraphrased, which is very, very interesting with respect to persuasion. He said, basically, you're creating relationships that you're going to betray, and you're going to have to justify that to yourself somehow, because some of those relationships can end up being very, very close. I remember him telling something about rocking some guy's daughter, who could have been his daughter, because their daughters were practically the same age. And so, if you're getting to the point where you're babysitting a bad dude's daughter, and you know that you're going to send this dude to jail, but you guys are so close, you're sharing personal information and so on, that's going to do something to your psyche. And so you need to find a way to justify that. Now, I'm not here to discuss the morals and the ethics behind doing undercover jobs, because obviously they are needed, because there are a lot of bad guys out there. However, with respect to persuasion, this is very, very interesting, because if there's anything you have to be when you're working as an FBI undercover agent, or any sort of undercover agent for any sort of law enforcement agency, it is to be persuasive. I actually remember a story from my own country where some old man in his 80s or something, who felt very, very lonely, who was suspected for having done some criminal stuff way back in the day, like 30 years ago, when he was in his 50s, was subjected to this young chap who came and visited him every single week, and they hung out together, and they developed this close relationship. And this guy was really a law enforcement undercover agent, working undercover, just collecting information about this perceived criminal guy, who it later on turned out was actually innocent, if my memory serves me correct. So that's sort of like the bad side about being undercover. You're playing with people's emotions, and you better be certain that these people have actually committed the crimes that you're accusing them of having done. Now, be that as it may, but with respect to persuasion, just imagine all the stuff that you have to do, all the work that you have to do in advance to be able to infiltrate such a gang. In this, in Scott Payne's case, before he could even infiltrate this criminal or this outlaw biker gang, his story needed to check out. They needed to know that he was whom he said he was. They needed to know that he was that it was into riding bikes. Because if he wasn't into riding bikes, then how in the world could he infiltrate an outlaw biker gang or a criminal biker gang? It's kind of like me. I can't ride bikes, nor do I like riding bikes. I find them to be scary, quite frankly. I could never have done that. I couldn't even have lied and said, hey, you know what, I'm into bikes, blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about bikes. So clearly that's not for me. And so the end point here is, if you're persuading somebody and you're saying that you're a specific type of person, then your story better needs to check out, which means that you need to be real, which means the real persuasion actually starts by you being real and starts by you getting your thing straight, by doing what you're saying that you're supposed to do. And let that be the sales and persuasion lesson for the day. If you want to learn more about sales, persuasion, and business, get subscribed to my email list. The link to do so is in the episode description wherever you're watching or listening to this, and I'll see you there.